I negotiated a $25 million deal, but the CEO's son stole credit and fired me. That choice was his downfall. My name is Edward Whitmore. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 18 years, I poured my life into building Summit Technologies. When I first joined, it was a struggling mid-size firm. Today, it's a major player in the enterprise software industry. As Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, I was the guy closing the big deals. Over the years, I personally negotiated contracts worth more than $280 million. I had a reputation for integrity and reliability that opened doors from New York to the entire East Coast. On the surface, life was good. I lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom home in Westchester County, drove a dependable 2019 Honda Accord, and had built the kind of career most people would envy. But the story I'm about to share, what happened to me between February and July of 2024, taught me something brutal. The deepest betrayals don't come from your enemies. They come from the people you trust most. If you love stories of cold-blooded revenge and shocking twists, make sure to like this video and subscribe. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every single day, each one more intense than the last. My story begins with Meridian Industries, a Fortune 500 manufacturing giant. They were looking to modernize their entire IT infrastructure, a contract worth $22 million over 3 years. This wasn't just another deal. It was the biggest opportunity in Summit's history. Patricia Rodriguez, Meridian CTO, reached out to me directly. We'd known each other for over 2 years through conferences and smaller collaborations, and she trusted me. That trust meant everything. From February through May, I lived and breathed that deal. 16-hour days, countless flights to Detroit, 8 trips in total. I restructured our proposal 3 different times, personally guaranteeing deadlines that would push my team to their limits. Nights alone in hotel rooms blurred into endless contract revisions, pricing adjustments, and late-night calls with our lawyers back in New York. The negotiations were brutal. Meridian's procurement team tore apart every line item, every warranty, every deliverable. But I kept fighting because I knew what this meant. Securing this contract would not only protect jobs at Summit, but would also launch us into new markets we'd only dreamed about. My wife, Sarah, barely saw me during those months, but she understood what was at stake. She knew how much was riding on this deal. And then there was Jonathan Prescott, the CEO's 29-year-old son. He had joined Summit just 8 months earlier as Director of Business Development. A fancy title, a corner office, a $145,000 salary, and absolutely no real responsibilities. Jonathan had an MBA from Wharton, drove a shiny red 2021 Tesla Model 3, and spent most of his time networking in overpriced Manhattan restaurants. He showed up to maybe half of our Monday morning meetings, and when he did, his contributions were nothing more than buzzwords and empty motivational lines. During the Meridian negotiations, he occasionally dropped by my office with a designer coffee in hand. "How are things progressing with that big manufacturing deal?" he'd ask casually, leaning against the doorframe. I gave him updates out of courtesy, never once imagining he was collecting my words for anything beyond casual interest. On May 18, 2024, after 4 exhausting months, I finally closed the Meridian deal. At exactly 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time, Patricia Rodriguez signed the contract. I immediately called Robert Prescott, our CEO, to share the news. "Edward, this is incredible," Robert said, his voice brimming with excitement. "This changes everything for Summit. We need to celebrate this properly." For the first time in years, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and satisfaction. 18 years of hard work, sacrifice, and relationship building had led to this moment. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the promotion Robert had promised me, the bonus structure we had discussed, and the recognition I was certain was finally within reach. But 3 days later, everything changed. On May 21st, at 9 a.m. sharp, Robert called me into his office. I walked in expecting to discuss my promotion and Meridian's implementation timeline. Instead, I found Jonathan already there, sitting across from his father's desk with a smug smile plastered across his face. That should have been my first warning. "Edward, sit down," Robert said, his tone oddly formal. "I wanted to personally thank you for your support on the Meridian deal. Jonathan has done an exceptional job leading this negotiation, and I'm proud of the initiative he's shown." The blood drained from my face. "What?" Jonathan leaned forward. "Dad, I told you, Edward's just being modest. He provided some valuable assistance, especially with the technical details." Valuable assistance. Technical details. I had spent 4 months of my life living out of hotel rooms, missing my daughter's college graduation, sacrificing time with my family, and serving as Meridian's sole point of contact. My name was on every email, every meeting recap, every contract revision. "Robert," I said carefully, trying to steady my voice, "there must be some confusion here. I was the lead negotiator on Meridian from day one. I can provide documentation of every meeting, Edward," Robert interrupted, his expression stiffening. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Jonathan has been keeping me fully updated. He's shown real leadership potential. Frankly, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need from the next generation." I glanced at Jonathan. He wasn't even looking at me, just idly examining his fingernails like none of this mattered. "I'm happy to share the spotlight, Edward," he said smoothly. "Team effort and all that. The spotlight. The deal that would define Summit's future for the next decade. The one I had bled for. Jonathan was now offering to share with me. I'd like to see documentation of Jonathan's involvement," I said firmly, keeping my tone professional. Robert's eyes hardened. "Edward, I don't like your tone. Are you questioning my son's integrity?" That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. A calculated, deliberate theft. And Robert Prescott was either complicit or willfully blind. "Of course not," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to understand the chain of communication." "The chain of communication runs through Jonathan," Robert replied without hesitation. "He's been managing client relationships at the executive level while you've handled operational details. Different skill sets, Edward. That's all. That's why we work as a team," Robert said. Operational details. After 18 years of building Summit's most valuable partnerships, I was being reduced to operational details. Jonathan finally chimed in, his tone dripping with condescension. "Edward, I know this transition might feel challenging, but I think there's a real opportunity for you to learn from this experience. Maybe take on more of a supporting role moving forward." A supporting role? In the company I had helped build, reporting to someone who couldn't negotiate a coffee order without assistance. "I think I need some time to process this," I said, rising from my chair. "Actually, Edward," Robert cut in, "we need to discuss your future here at Summit. Jonathan has raised some concerns about your attitude lately. Resistance to new leadership, reluctance to adapt to our evolving structure." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. Jonathan sighed dramatically, as though this pained him. "I hate to bring this up, but there have been issues with client communication. Patricia Rodriguez mentioned that she sometimes found you inflexible during negotiations. She specifically asked that I take a more active role in managing the relationship." It was an outright lie. Patricia had never spoken to Jonathan. I had her personal cell number, her direct email, even an invitation to her son's graduation party next month. But Jonathan was gambling on one thing, that his word carried more weight with his father than mine ever would. "I think we should call Patricia and clear this up," I said firmly. "That won't be necessary," Robert replied quickly. "We've already spoken with Meridian's executive team. They're comfortable with Jonathan as their primary point of contact going forward." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about stealing credit. This was about erasing me completely. Jonathan hadn't just taken my deal. He was positioning himself as the face of our entire relationship with Meridian. Any success that followed would be his, and mine would be buried. "So where does that leave me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Robert and Jonathan exchanged a look. Finally, Robert spoke. "We think it might be best if you took some time off. Clear your head. Decide if Summit is still the right place for your career. We'll call it a voluntary leave of absence." Voluntary. The word hung in the air like a threat. "And if I don't think that's necessary?" I pressed. Robert's voice hardened. Then we'll have to discuss other options. Summit is evolving, Edward. We need people who can evolve with us. I nodded slowly. I understand completely. And I did. I walked out of that office knowing I had just been pushed out of the company I had spent nearly 2 decades building. But I also knew something Jonathan and his father didn't. Patricia Rodriguez had never requested his involvement. Meridian's leadership team didn't even know his name. And I had every email, every contract draft, every meeting summary saved in my personal files. Jonathan Prescott had just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. That weekend, I turned my home office into a war room. 3 external hard drives, a secure cloud backup, and stacks of printed emails cover my desk. 18 years of documentation. Every client interaction, every negotiation, every deal I had closed was meticulously organized. Sunday evening, Sarah found me there surrounded by papers and binders. "Edward, what are you doing?" she asked softly. "Building a case," I said. The most damning evidence came from just the week before, a series of emails between Patricia Rodriguez and me. She had written about how excited she was to work with me personally during the implementation phase, conversation Jonathan had never been a part of. Even more telling, she had copied me on internal Meridian communications where their leadership team specifically discussed my expertise and understanding of their infrastructure needs. Jonathan's claim that Patricia wanted him involved was a lie. The emails prove she didn't even know he existed. So on Monday morning, May 24th, I called Patricia directly. "Patricia, it's Edward Whitmore. I wanted to touch base about the implementation timeline we discussed." "Edward, perfect timing," she replied warmly. "I was just telling my CTO how impressed we've been with your approach. When can we schedule the kickoff meeting?" Patricia asked. "Actually," I said carefully, "there's been a change on our side. Jonathan Prescott will be taking over as your primary contact." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry. Who?" "Jonathan Prescott. He's Robert Prescott's son, our new director of business development." "Edward, I've never heard this name before. Are you being reassigned to another project?" "Something like that." "Well, that's concerning. We specifically chose Summit because of your track record. Our board approved this contract based on your presentation and your guaranteed involvement in the implementation. If you're not managing this relationship, we need to reconsider whether this partnership still makes sense." That was exactly what I had hoped she would say. "I understand your concerns, Patricia. Perhaps you should speak directly with Robert Prescott about the transition." "I think I will," she said firmly. Patricia called Robert that same afternoon. And I know, because she called me right afterward, confused and unsettled. "Edward, I just spoke with your CEO," she said. "He assured me that his son has been managing our relationship from the very beginning. But I have no record of ever speaking with this Jonathan. He also said you've been having performance issues, which frankly contradicts everything I've seen from you over the last 4 months." "Performance issues?" She lowered her voice. "He mentioned problems with client communication and resistance to new leadership." "Edward, I've worked with you on 3 separate projects over 2 years. You're one of the most professional people I've dealt with. What's really going on there?" I chose my words carefully. "There have been some internal restructuring decisions that I don't entirely agree with." "Well," she said firmly, "I'm not comfortable moving forward without you directly involved. We've scheduled a call for Wednesday with Robert, his son, and me to clarify this situation. And I think you should be on that call as well." Wednesday, May 26th. The conference call played out like a piece of corporate theater. Robert Prescott opened with his usual cheerleading routine, praising Jonathan's visionary leadership and strategic oversight of the Meridian partnership. Jonathan then launched into a rehearsed speech about seamless transitions and elevated service delivery. Patricia listened politely for about 3 minutes. Then she cut him off. "I appreciate the introduction," she said sharply, "but I need to address some confusion. Jonathan, you've claimed to be my primary point of contact throughout these negotiations. Can you remind me of our conversation about the database migration timeline?" Silence. Jonathan cleared his throat. "Well, Patricia, I believe Edward handled most of the technical discussions, while I focused more on the strategic framework." "I see," she replied coolly. "And what about the pricing adjustments for the Chicago facility integration?" Another pause. I'd have to review my notes on that specific conversation. And the compliance requirements we discussed for the automotive division? Again, Jonathan faltered. I think Edward was more involved in those operational details. Patricia's tone sharpened. Jonathan, I'm asking about conversations you claim to have had with me personally. If you've been managing this relationship, surely you'd recall details of our biggest technical challenges. Jonathan was drowning, and everyone on that call knew it. Finally, I spoke carefully. Patricia, I think there may be some confusion about the division of responsibilities here. The only confusion, Patricia cut in, is why I'm suddenly being told that someone I've never spoken to has been managing a $22 million negotiation. Robert rushed to cover. Patricia, let's clarify the communication structure. Jonathan has been providing executive oversight, while Edward has handled the day-to-day interactions. Executive oversight of conversations that never happened. Patricia didn't buy it. She ended the call by requesting a full timeline of all interactions between Summit and Meridian, along with documentation of Jonathan's specific contributions. She gave them 48 hours. That evening, Jonathan called me directly. Edward, we need to talk. I'm on voluntary leave, remember? I said flatly. Look, he replied, his voice tight, there's been some confusion about roles and responsibilities. Maybe we can work together to clarify things for the client, Jonathan said. What kind of clarification did you have in mind? I asked. Well, you obviously have detailed knowledge of the client conversations. Maybe you could help me prepare some documentation that shows my involvement in the strategic aspects. It hit me then. He was asking me to help him fabricate evidence of work he had never done. Jonathan, I said, I think you should handle this on your own. You're the director of business development, after all. He hesitated. Edward, I know you're upset about the transition, but we can work this out. There might be a place for you in the new structure. The new structure where I report to you? I shot back. It doesn't have to be adversarial. We both want what's best for Summit. What's best for Summit is honest leadership and competent management. I'm trying to help you here, Edward. No, Jonathan. You're trying to save yourself. I hung up, fully aware that Jonathan Prescott was about to learn the difference between stealing credit and actually earning it. Patricia Rodriguez wasn't some middle manager who could be dazzled by buzzwords and corporate jargon. She was the CTO of a Fortune 500 company, a woman who had built her career on expertise, precision, and results. Jonathan had just 48 hours to provide documentation of contributions that existed only in his imagination. He missed the deadline. On Friday morning, May 28th, Patricia Rodriguez called Robert Prescott directly. She informed him that Meridian Industries was suspending the contract pending a full review of Summit's management structure and communication protocols. And she didn't stop there. She also told him she would be sharing her concerns with her network of Fortune 500 CTOs. In the enterprise software world, reputation spreads fast, and once it's damaged, it spreads even faster. By the first week of June, 3 other companies that had been considering Summit for projects quietly pulled out. The rumor mill was clear. Summit Technologies had misrepresented its leadership team and couldn't be trusted to deliver on high-stakes commitments. Then came a call. June 8th, Robert Prescott. Edward, we need to talk. Can you come in today? I'm on voluntary leave, remember? I said. Edward, please. The Meridian situation has become complicated. How complicated? They're threatening to cancel the contract and pursue legal action for misrepresentation. They claim we lied about our management structure. I let the silence hang. That does sound complicated. Look, I think there may have been some miscommunication about Jonathan's role in the negotiation. Maybe we moved too fast with the transition. Miscommunication? I said flatly. Robert, your son claimed he managed a 4-month negotiation he had zero involvement in. He told Patricia Rodriguez she personally requested his leadership, which never happened. He couldn't even answer basic questions about conversations he pretended to have had. That's not confusion. That's fraud. Edward, please. I'm asking for your help. The same help you offered me when you fired me for Jonathan's benefit. You weren't fired. You took voluntary leave. We both know what that meant. There was a long pause. Finally, he asked, what would it take to get you back? Full reinstatement. public acknowledgement of my role in the Meridian deal, and an apology from both of you. Edward, be reasonable. I'm being reasonable. I'm asking for the truth. I can offer you your old position back, plus a 15% raise. What about Jonathan? He'll continue in his current role, but with more clearly defined responsibilities. So he keeps his corner office and his $145,000 salary after attempting to steal a $22 million deal and lying to clients? Edward, he's my son. And that, I said, is exactly the problem. I hung up, knowing Robert Prescott would never hold his son accountable. And that meant Jonathan would keep making decisions that would destroy the company I had spent nearly 2 decades building. On June 10th, Patricia Rodriguez's legal team called me. Meridian Industries was officially canceling the contract and demanding the return of their $450,000 advance. They were also considering legal action for fraudulent misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty. But the real catastrophe was only beginning. Patricia had, indeed, shared her story with her peers. By mid-June, I was fielding calls from executives at other companies who wanted to know if Summit's leadership problems would affect their projects. I answered honestly. I didn't badmouth Summit, but I didn't sugarcoat the truth either. On June 18th, Robert Prescott called me again. His tone was different now, desperate. Edward, we've lost 4 contracts this week. The board is asking questions I can't answer. I need you to come back immediately. What about Jonathan? I asked. We'll work something out. What kind of something? Maybe a lateral move. Different responsibilities. Robert, your son committed fraud against our biggest client and destroyed your company's reputation. A lateral move isn't going to fix this. What do you want me to do? Fire my own son? I want you to do what any responsible CEO would do. Hold people accountable for their actions. I can't do that. Then you can't fix this. On June 25th, I got another call. This time from David Morrison, Summit's head of HR. Edward, the board would like to meet with you this afternoon. The emergency meeting was held in the same conference room where I had once presented the Meridian proposal. 5 board members. Robert Prescott. Jonathan. The tension was thick. Board Chairman William Hayes spoke first. Edward, we understand there have been disputes regarding the Meridian contract. We'd like to hear your perspective. For 30 minutes, I laid it all out. I showed them the timeline, backed up with emails, meeting notes, and client communications. I proved Jonathan's total absence from the negotiation. I showed how he lied to Patricia Rodriguez. And I explained the fallout, the canceled contracts, the lost trust, the reputational damage. When I finished, Hayes turned to Jonathan. Do you have a response? Jonathan tried to sound composed. I think Edward is understandably frustrated about the recent organizational changes. Sometimes, when people feel their authority is threatened, they become territorial about client relationships. That's not an answer, Hayes interrupted. Did you or did you not claim to have personally managed the Meridian negotiation? I provided strategic oversight and executive guidance, Jonathan replied. Show me one email, one meeting note, one document that proves your involvement. Jonathan had nothing, because nothing existed. The board voted unanimously. Jonathan Prescott was terminated effective immediately. Robert Prescott was removed as CEO for negligence and complicity in misleading clients. Then they turned to me. Edward, we'd like you to take over as CEO. I accepted. By the end of July, I had rebuilt much of what was lost. Patricia Rodriguez agreed to resume our partnership under a revised $18 million contract. 3 other clients returned once they saw the changes in leadership and accountability. And Jonathan? His LinkedIn profile now describes him as an entrepreneurial consultant seeking new opportunities. He's been seeking for quite a while, because sometimes the best revenge isn't something you actively do. Sometimes it's letting people face the natural consequences of their own choices. Jonathan thought he could steal 18 years of relationships, hard work, and trust. Instead, he learned that reputation isn't inherited, it's earned. And once you lose it, it's almost impossible to get back. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.